on there. Go Friars. Welcome to the Positive Impact Podcast. I am your host, Terrell Dozier, and on this Positive Impact Podcast, we talk about all topics that I love. Tonight's guest is a world-renowned sports psychologist. I'm very honored to have him on here tonight. Please welcome Dr. Joe Carr. We just need you to hit accept, Doc. All right, let's try this again.
Okay. Okay. You can see me now?
There you go.
Okay, good. All right. Good.
Listen, Doc, I
Thank
ain't
you
gonna.
very much, man. I mean, this plane is just getting some gas, so we're ready to go, man.
Listen, I'm not gonna talk about the technical difficulties, Doc. You good with me? It's our secret, man. Oh man.
Well,
But
I'm
listen,
glad
man.
to be on your show, man.
Good. I appreciate you. I appreciate you so much for coming on. You don't know how excited I am to have you. The first question I gotta ask you is how you doing during this pandemic?
Well, it's for me. It's all about pivoting. This is not a normal situation. My routine for traveling, my routine for interacting, my routine for sleeping, my routine for eating, all that stuff has been interrupted.
Mm-hmm.
So the difference between, being a champion and not being a champion is that I got to be flexible. And I'm learning how to become flexible during this pandemic. I'm learning, that there's new ways how to cope. And if I do that, I think, I'll be okay, just like everyone else.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we only got an hour, but like going through your story, man, I could probably talk to you forever. So let's try to get into it, and let's give the viewers as much as we can about you, man. So
All right, get that shovel. Let's dig.
let's go. So let's go back in the day. Take me to the beginning, growing up in DC.
Well, for me, I mean, my story is kind of atypical, but may not be atypical because I was a basketball addict. That's all I did. I ate, sleep, and drank basketball. I grew up in the projects in Southeast DC, and there was a lot of fire, and a lot of hunger there. But everything was skewed toward playing basketball, and so much so that I stayed back 6 times. 3 times in the third grade. uh, two times in the sixth grade and 1 time in the seventh grade. So with all of that, people began to think, okay, well, is there something wrong with this guy upstairs? Does he have some special needs? And of course, according to the diagnostic assessments that they gave at that time, I was placed in a slow learning class. Another guy famous who was in that same situation was John Thompson. He was like my big brother. Anyway, that's another story.
Mm-hmm.
But in any event, playing basketball, people begin to think, well, you can't be retarded if you're playing like that. If you're scoring 25 and 30 points, something is definitely wrong. So one of the teachers kind of reached out and said, well, look, if you can somehow make the honor roll in my sixth time around in the seventh grade, they said, we'll skip you to a vocational school. And I said, what do you mean skip me? He says, well, you have to get all A's, at least one B, and then we can work out a situation for you to skip. So make a long story short, I did that. That challenge was given to me. I was skipped, and I went to a vocational school, and that was the beginning of my high school journey. So let's go back a little bit before that. I came up in a very religious situation. My mother, she was a pianist, and she was like an evangelist. She went from church to church and she played. Her goal was to get me to be, a child prodigy preacher. But that didn't work out very well because I had other thoughts in mind. Um, and so while she was trying to push me into the church, I was trying to push myself to be an All-American. But I just didn't make the connection that if you were going to be a great basketball player, you had to be pretty good in the books. So that's where I had to kind of connect myself with older players. So Big John, he grew up in the same projects as I did, and so did Elgin Bell and other guys like that. And I kind of connected myself to those guys because they had already gone on to school and they had some success, and I was kind of living vicariously through them. So I got the wake up call, after, that 6-time stand back, and I said, okay, well, this maybe could be my turn to really to make something of myself. So I go to Bell Vocational High School in DC. I make All City, and then I'm playing basketball in the summer, and this priest, sees me playing. He says, it may be a good idea for you to try to come to a Catholic school. Well, in DC, Catholic school is a big deal.
Yes.
And I transferred to a place called Bishop McNamara. Now, I didn't know at the time that, you had to have so many core classes and all that kind of stuff. So I transferred to a Catholic school, and I didn't have all the classes I needed in order to be eligible.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big setback. So I ended up staying, not playing in my junior and senior year in high school. And that became a very tumultuous situation for me. I just went crazy. So I ended up, going to junior college and then playing at Sacramento State. And then all of a sudden, it dawned on me like, basketball may not be my ticket, even though I've invested so much time in it. So somebody said to me, well, they got this thing called psychology. Why don't you try to do that? So I tried it, and I went on and I got my master's, in counseling. And so my first job out there in Sacramento was at San Quentin. And so since I'm from the hood and, I'm not really scared by guys, they were doing, I guess the average guy was doing something like 3 life sentences or something like that, really bad situation. I really got my chance to really show that I was a good counselor by working in that environment. So from correctional counseling, I said, this is not going to work for me. There's a lot of stress. I'm very familiar with this situation. I want to find something that I'm familiar with. So let's try sports. So George Raveling, he was a coach that time at a place called Washington State University, but also he's from my hood in Washington, D.C. He said, hey, man, I can try to get you to school in Washington State and maybe, try your hand in being a doctor. So I said, let's try that and see what it works. So I got to Washington State, I get my doctorate. And then I hooked up with a dude named Bobby Dandridge. And Bobby was playing with the Washington Bullets at that time. And also he played with the Bucks. And he said, hey, man, let's put our heads together. Maybe we could do something special. I said, what do you have in mind? He says, look, I had a crazy life, as a basketball player, in the NBA. I did a lot of drugs. I was doing a lot of womanizing. He said, there's a lot of guys who have my story, but they don't really have any help. So let's see if we can do something about it. So we both came up with this idea of a rookie transition program.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like in 1984.
Right.
So Oscar Robertson thought that was a good idea. So we hooked up with Oscar, and Oscar took us to Stern. And Stern said, that's dope. That's crazy. Let's make it happen.
Right.
So with my skills in psychology and with Bobby's, experience playing in the NBA, we kind of had a good marriage. And as a result of us developing the rookie transition program, I guess we were kind of before our times. Every sport, whether it's football, whether it's baseball, whether it's soccer, now everybody has a rookie transition program. So that's going to be our should I say, name the fame. You know, hopefully we get to the Hall of Fame as a result of doing that. But the rookie transition program at that time had to come about because in 1984, the league was plagued with a lot of drugs. Cocaine was just taking over, you know, the league, and it was really impacting their brand. And you know, so with the rookie transition program, you know, we said when we got to do something with life skills, we got to do something with mentoring, we got to do something with life after bat, all that stuff.
Right.
And it just kind of gave, you know, the players a new opportunity to reinvent themselves so they could be commodities, which they really are right now.
Right.
So marketing took off. The players started to get more involved in advertising. I mean, it just really became a game changer.
Absolutely.
So Bobby D, as I like to call him, I mean, he was a really heavy thinker. A lot of people don't know this, but he played in the early days Norfolk State. And so he and a guy named R.A.R.E were kind of going at it neck to neck in that league. And it was Bobby Dandridge who was the all-time leading scorer, not R.A.R.E. And Earl, you know, to this day, you know, is given credit for being, you know, the cream of the crop there, but really it was Bobby. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is because for whatever reason, you know, Bobby, as skilled as he was and played on 2 championship teams, you know, and then went to Washington Bullets and then led them to a world championship, he never really got his due. He never really got into the Hall of Fame. And to this day, Oscar and so does Kareem, everybody's always pushing, hey man, you know, don't forget Bobby D, because I mean, he really did a number on Dr. J and everybody else who came his way.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't get into the Hall of Fame, you know, as a player, hopefully he gets in the Hall of Fame for us developing this rookie transition program.
No question
I'm
about.
probably rambling too much, but I mean,
Nah, it's okay. Listen, I'm gonna go back a little bit because I want to make sure that I want to touch on your education real quick before we bring it back current and talk about your undergrad degree in psychology, and then you also got a master's degree as well. And yeah, you got. And then not only did you get your doctorate, but you were the first African American to graduate from that program at Washington State University. So I think that's truly important, coming from a kid who stayed back 6 times. You know what I mean? Like, who would have thought? No, so I'm huge on education, man. I think that's super important that you were so proactive back then, and you turned a negative into a positive. So I definitely want to give you your love on that one. So do me a favor before we talk about the NBA rookie program. You've worked with all types of players, LeBron and AI and Carmelo, and you've worked with so many great college basketball teams, the big names, the Kentuckys, the UConns and stuff. So talk about how you get involved with these programs and with these players. Is it just all reference, or is it they just look you up and say, listen, we know your work and this is what we want you to do?
Well, so we have to go back to my early days. After I got my doctorate, at Washington State, I came home and I tried to figure out what am I going to do to make a difference. And I felt a lot of guilt because most of my friends who I grew up with in the projects, they had died from, a lot of different things. And so I'm going to say, what am I going to do to make a difference? How am I going to separate myself from all these people? Now I've got my doctorate. I'm going to make a lot of money. That's going to happen. But something was missing. And so what I had to do was I had to reach back into my head and I had to say, well, somebody helped me along the way and they made a difference. And who did that? And I remember John Thompson and the guy by the name of Jerry Chambers, he played for Utah. They had a gym and on Sundays, and all the guys would come to the gym and we would hoop. And they allowed me to play with them. They were older. And that's when I started to learn about going to college and all that kind of stuff. And I said, you know what, maybe I can develop a gym too. So I developed something called Doc's Gym. And the concept that I had, which was a little different from my predecessors, was that I would get all the guys who were the All-Americans and the All-Stars, and I would also get those guys who were under-recruited, who were not on the radar, and the haves versus the have-nots, the underdogs versus the top dogs. and I would, create this kind of synergy on Sundays, and we used to call it church. And so the guys would come there, whether there were Adrian Dantley, there's a lot of who's that were in my gym, and so the college coaches, Lynn Bias, all those guys, would come. In fact, Lynn Bias, I'm taking a little derail here. Lynn Bias only had one scholarship, when he came to my gym. He was very under recruited. Nobody really knew about him. But anyway, people like Lynn Bias, and I had some other guys like Adrian Dantley, and coaches would come and they would say, well, who is that guy? Who is he? One such name was a guy named Jerome Williams, Junkyard Dog. I don't know if you remember him.
Absolutely.
He had no scholarships. And for example, one summer when he first came to my gym, he was 6'2", and by the end of the summer, he was 6'9". So then John comes to the gym and said, "Who is that nigga?" I say, that's JY. Things like that would happen, and I'm trying to rush through this, but I need to be very strategic. I think over a 20-year period that I had the gym, we placed over 3,000 kids into college. And I take note of that because, in DC, like New York, there are a lot of guys who can really play, maybe play better than the guys in the pros, but because of lack of discipline and whatever, they just decide to give up on it. But most of the guys that came to my gym and went to get a 4-year degree, some became doctors and lawyers as well. That really became a laboratory, for education. But basketball was the vehicle.
Yeah,
so was there because Alan had never heard of Moochie Norris, and Alan was just coming to Georgetown. I said, I got a guy that I think will kick your ass. And so I had he and Moochie play a one-on-one full-court game to 11 points. And Moochie, did a crossover on him. He said, "What in the hell is that?"
Yeah.
And that's an untold story. That's how he basically learned how to do a crossover, in Doc's gym. So we had a lot of situations. Another one was when it was to 11 points, you could score two ways. You could score either by making baskets, or you could score by having 3 stops in a row. So if you got 3 stops in a row, we would call that a kill.
Okay.
So that's become very popular now because I now use that in my psychological game planning with players. Now, the purpose of a kill is if you get 3 stops in a row, there's so much devastation that you can do to an opponent, if you stop them, 6 times during the course of a game. And the 1 stop is 3, but if you do that 6 times, that's based on my studies of 4,322 teams. If you can stop somebody a total of 6 times, 3 times in a row, you have a chance of winning that game. So what came out of that laboratory is the kill. And when I started using it with the team, I noticed that guys became less consumed with their individual numbers and more consumed with the fight. And so anytime you can get a guy to shed his selfishness for the sake of the fight, now you have a person who could be a good teammate. You have a person who can probably be a good connecting person with the coach. And then, life is better. And that's what I call chemistry when you lose yourself in the fight. So the gym was very instrumental for me experimenting with different things, which I now use in my practice when I'm trying to help teams to become from underdogs to top dogs. So, yeah. So church brings back a lot of memories. I have guys all over the world who played in that. Dikembe Mutombo is another example of that. When he came to America, the 2 things he could say was Doc and McDonald's. And a good story about him was when he came to my gym, he didn't really speak very much English. But I told him, I said, you can probably impact the world in 2 ways. If you talk and by blocking shots. So one of the things I would do is I would raise the basket from 10 feet to 13 feet so that he could stretch his arms. And in doing that, he now was not concerned with anything else except for tracking the ball and blocking shots. It's probably the best thing I did for him. We still talk about that today. But those are examples that, that I'm plucking from as I go through this, because you're you're forcing me to go back. I don't usually go back in my memory decks that way, but the church, the gym, was a good way for me to make a difference. So, as a young clinician, I thought that if I could give back in this way, have the haves play against the have-nots, and the have-nots get scholarships, this would be a way that could really, should I say, upset the balance in terms of guys getting a chance to do something for themselves and for their families.
No question about it. I love that story. I was going to bring that up later, man, because I thought that was an incredible story. The NCAA actually wasn't happy with you with the Jerome Williams situation. I read about, you know what I'm saying? But we ain't going to get into that either, Doc. We ain't going to get into that either. Talk to us about your mantra of R.A.R.E. R-A-R-E.
Well, based on 4,000 teams, I had to figure out what separated the championship teams from the losing teams. And I came up with 4 factors doing statistical analysis. And the 4 factors were R.A.R.E., R-A-R-E. R.A.R.E. stands for relationships. In my view, if those relationships were really tight and really connected, and were non-superficial, and you and I could go out and have dinner after we kicked each other's butt in practice, then that's a serious relationship. That's one that, that's worth investing in. And I found that if I could help a team, to develop that kind of brotherhood, during my stay with them, that would be something special. The next acronym stands as A, stands for accepting challenges. That's a unique one because if I'm not able to call you out, if I'm not able to tell you that your breath stinks, I'm not able to say, you know what, you're not running hard enough, or you're not talking loud enough, and you're not able to accept that at a high level, it's probably going to be difficult for me to coach you. Mm-hmm. It's probably going to be real difficult for my teammates to coach you. Right. So that's going to eliminate you from that. Mm-hmm. And so accepting challenges became another factor. Another factor was recovery from mistakes. A lot of guys that I work with in college and in pros, they want to be perfect. They obsess about missed or made shots. They obsess about making mistakes during a turnover or just making mistakes in general. So you have to have guys who have very short memories. You have to have guys who don't really care about whether or not the ball goes in. And if you can have those guys who can make quick recoveries, and if they have a bad game, or if the team have a bad game, now you have a guy who has good DNA. He's got the material to say, you know what, I can withstand anything you throw at me. And the last an acronym is E, executing coach's directions. You got to have a guy who basically says, you know what, I have blind trust in whatever the coach is telling. I'm a yes man. I'm going to do whatever he says because I believe in him. So I've eliminated a lot of guys right there. R.A.R.E., I've eliminated a lot of guys who can't play for me. Mm-hmm. Now, the tough thing is that everybody doesn't come into your gym or come into your team ready-made. Yeah. So you have to look at those guys who have the potential or the propensity to drift in those 4 factors. If they can drift toward those 4 factors, then those are the kind of guys you want to go after. Mm-hmm. But then, it becomes really perplexing for coaches that if I score 20 points a game just to be a yes man because of my ego, mm-hmm. then team and you be a cancer and I lose my job and right. Then you be a pro. So coaches are I take all that stuff from those guys who can score 20 points a game and get 15 rebounds, or do I deal with the guy who can fit within the R.A.R.E. paradigm? I mm-hmm. go with the guy who can fit in the R.A.R.E. paradigm because that's the guy in the long run that's going to help me. And I'm going to be able to teach him something. He's going to develop some life lessons out of this. And the life lesson that he's going to learn from this is going to be so much bigger than basketball. It's a game changer. So, R.A.R.E. is my mantra. I have been able to use that with a lot of teams with a lot of success. And so whether I'm working with a Notre Dame or a Florida State or UConn whose coach has never coached before, or just a lot of teams. I mean, who are not expected to win anything, and all of a sudden they see that these teams are rolling over these guys. You have to say, like, what's going on here? Well, what's going on here is that we have a bunch of guys who are subscribing to a belief system. It works, and as a result of it working, guys are buying in. So sacrifice is a big thing with R.A.R.E. because that's what it is. If I'm able to sacrifice on a high level, and that's a big thing. And I'm jumping again because most of the families that we see these days, sacrifice is not part of the equation. The parents want to overgive because they've had bad experiences, and I can understand that. I mean, as a father, an uncle, I mean, I don't want anybody to have experience I have, but at the same time, sometimes you have to say, "Look, you can't get those Jordans like that." I can't give you the $20 that you want. You're going to have to work for it. Those are the kind of kids who say, "Yeah, Doc, I mean, I understand I can't get what I want, but I'm willing to wait my turn." Those are the kind of kids I want, but those kids are hard to find. With our Florida State team, for example, when guys go in the game, and let's just say they're not doing well and they sit down on the floor and they come on the bench and let's say they are starters, but the guy who goes in for them, they're having a great game. They'll say, "Coach, don't take him out. Let that guy play." I mean, that's unheard of. But you have to cultivate that kind of stuff, on your team. You have to be willing to say, "These are my principles, R.A.R.E. I'm not going to compromise regardless. And either you're in or you're out." And so that's what it is. But so you brought up another term that just got me going. R.A.R.E. is a great metaphor, and I use it all the time. My biggest thing, though, in a team is that I like working with the coaches first because some of the coaches, there's a lot of pressure on them, to win. And I don't necessarily equate winning with just, how am I going to make you a better person, man? I mean, how am I going to get you to trust me? Because if you can learn, the tool of trusting, you can have a good wife, you can have a good kid. So many things you could do with that. And I want to win that game. And that's the game I want to win. But that sounds so corny. What's the relevance of that? Well, the relevance of that is if I can teach a person how to trust, and if I can teach a person how to sacrifice, and if I can teach a person just to give up themselves at a deep level, man, whatever athleticism you have, you're going to give me everything. And I'll take that anytime, You're going to give me your passion. You're going to give me your hunger. So there's a lot of guys, who are All-Americans, and they've got all the accolades. But when you throw a loose ball, when you give them a chance to get a loose ball, they're not going to dive after the loose ball. They're just not going to do it.
You're right.
They let somebody else have it.
Yeah.
Well, is that the guy you're going to take? No, I'm going to pass on that guy. Now, I may get fired, but if I get fired, I mean, I'm going to get fired my way, if that makes sense.
Right. Nah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I did a show last week where I spoke about and told my story last week. And when I was in college, I had a problem with my college coach and wound up leaving school. Now, in reading your story, I guess we could have used your mid-court roundtable to kind of talk about coach and player conflict resolution. So talk about that a little bit and why that is so important. The big piece to the coach and player relationship, but what happens when things aren't going good? What can that go to the relationship, and what's your work there?
When I first take a team, I'm with them for maybe 3 or 4 days, and we're in a room for maybe 16 hours a day. And for some of the people listening to this, they might say, well, damn, it's a long time. How do you keep their attention? We're breaking down walls. We're unlocking doors. We're getting to see people at the metaphysical level. We're like a MRI. We're going all the way down to the bone. Yeah. And they're sharing their stories, and they're talking about themselves in so many levels. There's a lot of crying going on. There's a lot of sharing going on. So why am I saying that? As a result of doing that work early on, you get to know players beyond the superficial. You get to know, who they are, what they are, and the defense mechanisms and the facades that they put up. And they see themselves in their players because there are other guys in there are doing the same thing. For example, I'll give you a case. For example, there's one guy who he had an anger management problem, and he every time the coach would criticize him, he would want to fight the coach. I had another guy who he had an anger problem, but the way he dealt with his problem is that he want to run. He'd run out the room and run out, run off the court. But both guys had one thing in problem, and it was anger. So let's take the first guy who would strike out. Come to find out, underneath that anger, his father made him watch while he burned her alive. And he was like 7 years old, and he was helpless. And so he had so much rage, he was so traumatized. He just happened to be a basketball player. So all this rage that he was developing over the years, he was kind of developing that because he was waiting for his dad to get out of jail, because his whole life script was to be a basketball player, to be strong, and then kill him. So that came out, in our circle, and the tears were real. The emotions were real. And so what I did was I had him to write a letter, an unmailed letter to his dad. I want him to let all those feelings and those emotions out. And of course, there was not a dry eye in the room. And, most of the kids that are on these college teams, they don't have fathers. They have beefs with their fathers. So they could all relate to this,
Right.
And so once this letter was written, I said, now you're going to have to do something that you've never done before. And that is, after you write this letter, you're going to read it, and then we're all going to have a burial. I'm going to have your brothers in this room put together a coffin. I want you to put that letter in a coffin, and we're going to go outside and we're going to bury it. Because if you don't let loose this anger, if you don't go any further with you, you can't go any further with us right here and now. There's nowhere in the world we can go for a championship, which is going to be the most stressful. So everybody got to we really got to dig deep. So this kid, oh man, he now is an accountant, on Wall Street, doing a phenomenal job.
Good.
But that gives you an example that, when I'm doing this stuff, it's either you're 10 toes in or you're no toes in. And my job is to make sure that I exercise all those emotions. I exercise all those feelings so that the trauma that they are experiencing, which they will continue to experience, it's manageable. It's manageable to the point where their person is coachable. And if they're coachable, then we got a chance. So if you multiply that situation times maybe 12 other guys in the room who are using that guy as a mirror, you really have a very exhaustive situation at the end of 4 days. I mean, it's very draining. So after that's over with, you're able now to coach them because there's so much weight that's been lifted off of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
So we're able to take these guys who heretofore were knuckleheads, who weren't fitting in, now that they have, quote unquote, been exercised of their pain, they now feel no threat about confrontation, about being challenged, about love, about connecting. Because sometimes with these guys, that's more fearful than fighting, connecting. Okay. Then I have these guys hug each other. I mean, most of these guys have never hugged another man before. I mean, but I always give them this situation. I said, when you look on TV and a championship game, what do you see? Do you see people at arm's length with each other? Or what do you see? They say, well, we see them hugging and crying. Yes, it's an emotional deal. And so we've got to have that level of intimacy if we're going to make this thing, what it needs to be. So those are the kinds of things that we do in order to make this a championship opportunity before they get the basketball. Now, once they get the basketball, on top of those other behavioral things that we're teaching them, how to be intimate, how to be close, how to stay connected, Now we have an opportunity to do something special. So
Right.
we don't care if you're playing UCLA or Kentucky or anybody else. It doesn't matter because we've dealt with the greatest pain, the pain inside of here.
Right.
That was
No
the
doubt.
biggest ghost. Does that make
Nah, for
sense?
sure. Nah, that's great. That's super powerful. So because mental health is such a big thing nowadays, you know what I mean, more so than it was back in the day. How, you know, what can we do to peel back the layers earlier, you know what I'm saying? And what signs, you know, should we be looking for? Like youth sports is such a stressful thing, you know, like it's become more of a business. It's trying to get to the scholarship, and for some kids, it's trying to get to the pros to take care of families. So there's so much pressure built up, and you know what I'm so how can we support earlier in life to better equip our student athletes to deal with this?
And you heard this many times, but it does start with the family. And I mentioned this on another show before. We have something now called daddy ball, where these fathers are so crazy about their kid making that they organize AU teams and they just drive and drive. We've got to get these parents to accept about your feelings.
Yeah.
It's okay to share. It's okay, you know, to say I love you. I mean, and that level of intimacy, if we can start that at home, that's going to be the difference maker. Because if I don't think it's normal to talk about my stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to stuff my stuff, and
Yeah.
then I'm going to implode.
Right.
And then it's going to be too late. So have these difficult conversations with your son about your life.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about your story.
Mm-hmm.
Let him know it's okay to hurt. It's okay to experience joy.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to talk about fear.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can do those three things, you know, things like depression and things like anxiety, at least if you're coached on how to talk about it, now when you reach a person like me who have tools, I can give you tools so you can work with it. But if you're on lockdown and if you're on maximum security because you haven't had the training at home to talk about stuff, you're not going to talk to a person like me. You're going to run like hell. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to deflect. Does that make sense?
Nah, that makes a lot of sense. So when you're working with a team or you're working with a program, how extensive is it? Like, so have there been teams like you talked about the first 4 days? Have there been teams? Do they bring you back during certain points of the year to kind of continue the work?
Yeah, I
Because the
stay with
work.
the team. I stay with the team the whole year. Different teams have different budget and needs.
Mm-hmm.
Like one team, you know, I'm with them at least twice a month for the entire year.
Right.
Another team, I may be with them 3 times a year. I may go in the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and for postseason stuff. So it
Mm-hmm.
depends on the need of the team. You know, would dictate on how much. You know, of course, some coaches don't see what I see. So it's quickness and strength. You got some emotional toughness in here. You know, but if you're assisting relationships, and if you're not, this is going to be the wild, wild west. Going to have to open up his heart and open up his program, which is very difficult for some guys, and say, okay, doc, I'm naked now. I'm willing to work with you. I'm willing for you to give me some tools. That's hard for some coaches to do. I mean, extremely difficult. See how many guys I've helped, you know, get to another place who were no-name guys, but now all of a sudden they're doing well. I said, well, shit, maybe you know a little something, something.
Right.
And but that humility is and that openness and that vulnerability is hard for some to get to. Does that make sense?
Nah, that's great. And so talk about, so now that I'm talking to you, and this is a great educational background, a huge educational background, and you're obviously very, very knowledgeable. But what I'm finding out about you right now is you have a balance of you're not just trying to over talk me, we're actually reaching each other because, you know, maybe we grew how important that is because, you know, way younger than you that might think like, oh, this is an old guy, but you're finding a way to connect with them. So talk about how your story resonates with their story.
Well, I just have one basic premise that I don't want to be invisible. I want to be available. And what I mean by that is if I'm invisible, I'm using a lot of big words that don't make sense to them. I'm acting, you know, my body language is distant. I'm not necessarily being transparent with my story. And as a result of that, I'm not accessible. So being accessible is like what we're doing now. You know, we're talking, we're using common language. I'm sharing pieces of myself, you're sharing pieces of yourself, but it's strategic, you know. So you have to have a lot of clinical footwork to do what I do because it's not as easy as it looks.
Right.
But at the same time, you know, it is based on basic interpersonal stuff that I have learned over the years. Some street, some family, and some academic.
Right.
And that crossover, if I can use that metaphor, you know, allows me, you know, to do what I do. But I also have learned to empower people with your story. It's about you.
Right.
And my job is to get you by unlocking doors through what sentences or whatever. The question is like the best question in the world. Tell me what's going on with you, baby.
Yeah.
you know, and I can help guide you because most of the guys that we work with, the kids, they're not talkers. They want to be on Instagram, want to be on text. They want to do all those things which do not involve, you know, exchanging information. So my biggest challenge when I'm working with a team is to get guys to talk to each other, just to have tough conversations. So we have things like challenge circles, step on each other's toes. I'm using a lot of different things, but a lot of different exercises that I have developed in order to jumpstart people to talk.
Absolutely.
Because a team that doesn't talk is a dysfunctional fucking team. They just are. They're doomed to fail. Yeah. So I got to get people to normalize that it's okay to talk. You know, even if it sounds nonsensical, but having a conversation. So I developed this exercise called chatter. Now this sounds crazy. So I'm using a beautiful place. There's a team in Santa Barbara. Let's use that because that's as a beautiful place. So Santa Barbara, they came in second in the league this year, and they won 20-some games. But they're a non-talking team. So if you can visualize being in Santa Barbara in this beautiful white sand beach, I had the guys walk, I'm going to say maybe a mile and a half down the beach where we couldn't see them. I said, this exercise is called chatter. And I said, for 15 minutes straight, nonstop, you got to talk. You got to chat. Yeah. And I want you to make the connection between that chatter and being in a crowd and hear yourself talk. And the idea is that we have to generate energy. And the way we're going to do that is through chatter. Right. And I said, even if you're hoarse or throat, if you're hoarse and you feel like you can't talk anymore, I want your teammate to point to you and tell them the chatter to talk more, because we have to have some accountability with that. So the point I'm making is that I have to come up with exercises that are a little off the hook per se, but they're fun, but I can relate them to the game and to life. Right. And so what we did with the chatter thing is that I said, Coach, we're going to take a picture of this, and we're going to take a video of this, and we're going to play this during different times of the year to trigger them to understand, like, this day has relevance to days going forward. So they had lost 2 games in a row, you know, to a team, and it was because their talk, they had I call it dips. When you're not talking, you know, you have a dip on defense. You're not going to run hard. You're not going to have high hands. You're not going to, you know, do the things you need in order to hunt the ball. But they had dips with regard to their talking. So I said, we need to take that video out and we need to play it to remind them that that beach was just not, a vacation. It was a tool that they have to use continuously. So they got reacquainted again with the juice, with the energy, via chatter, and they went on, to win the rest of their games. It just so happens that when this COVID-19 thing came down, that was the end of the season, but I think they had a chance to win it.
Okay.
But I say this to say that, the talking thing, I can't emphasize enough, whoever's listening as a players, you may be working on your jump shot, it may be butter. You may be working on your dunk, it may be butter. But if you can't talk, during the course of a game or in practice, it's going to be very hard to use you. I mean, it really is.
Right.
So I hope that, you use this piece of advice. Conversation is connecting. Talking is just everlasting. And I just want anybody out there who's interested in playing sports to understand how valuable conversation and talking is. So with that, I'm going to use another example because before I started working with them, Lynn and Hammond, those guys, they always had a lot of athletes and stuff. Man, they had a lot of athletes.
Yeah.
And so the only thing was missing was juice. And so juice, I define juice, just us in combat every day. So I developed something called EGBs, energy generating behaviors. I'm not going to give you what they are. I'm going to give you a sample of them. So one would be running the floor in 6 seconds. Another one would be getting offensive rebounds.
Okay.
Another one would be getting deflections. Another one would be getting steals. In other words, I have like 20 of them. So I gave this group the EGBs. And I swear to God, they went through the ACC like Sherman running through Georgia. I mean, they would play. They play Duke. They play North Carolina. Now, when you see Florida State, you say, "What the fuck is going on?"
Yeah.
Because we play 11 guys, sometimes 12 guys, and we're not consumed with the individual. We're consumed with just hunting the basketball, all because of talking. Talking has really made a difference in that situation. I would use that as a live example.
Right.
I can use others, but that's one that comes to mind. Texas is another one. I just took on Texas. Everybody gave up on us this year, Texas, but watch out coming up this year. We got a shot.
Right.
Now my goal is, I know you're gonna laugh at this. My goal is to have 2 African Americans play for a national championship. What do you think about that?
Okay. Now I think it's needed.
What would be the significance of that?
That'd be huge.
Besides that, in your mind, what would be the significance of that? In your mind?
To me, it would just be about just having 2 Black coaches just competing at the highest level, and then that gives hope.
Yeah. See, I see it. I don't see it as a basketball thing. I see it as a leadership thing, because now young kids can say, "Damn, wow." These guys they're captains of their institutions, and they can run stuff. I mean, I think that's really big, because if you're not a sports announcer, you got to talk about that. That's not, you can't just focus on recruiting anymore, right?
Yeah.
And guys playing for a national championship, man, that would be, woo, that would be sweet. I'm sorry I took a divergence there, but
listen, man. Listen, this is all. Listen, let me tell you something. I'm taking so many notes over here, man. Like this is definitely awesome, man. So with the rookie transition program, I think transition is the biggest thing. I do a transition program for 8th grade student athletes going into their freshman year of high school. I know a lot of colleges take the seniors and they get them on campus early to transition them. So talk about how important it is, when you feel like at one level, you got it all figured out, and all of a sudden you got to jump to another level. Talk about that challenge, and especially on the highest level with this rookie transition program. They're coming into the NBA with a ton of what you go through with that.
Well, I no longer, get involved with that anymore. We hand that over. My dream for that program, which has come to fruition, is that they deal with several aspects of life, personal, family, business, and financial investments. And they carve it up and they present it, to the players. So he's at this level, the magnitude. Then, teach them how to develop boundaries. Because with all this notoriety and with all this fame, it's intoxicating. It is like cocaine. Once people call your name and once you go into a restaurant, you don't have to sit in line anymore. They push you to the top of the list, and
Right.
they come over to you. Well, can I get you a free bottle of wine? I mean, this is happening, and you begin to think like this is reality. This is the way it's going to be. No, this has a shelf life,
Mm-hmm.
So while you are thinking about how all this feels, you better be planning for the eventuality of you're leaving the game. So you have to
Yes.
start thinking about that from the time you come in. So that's what the rookie transition program is starting to do now. And that is helping guys to become very holistic in
Mm-hmm.
terms of how they approach life. And because when we first did this, the word holistic was not in the vocabulary. But now, you got a chance as a African American or just as a young professional player to be a businessman, at a very high level,
Mm-hmm.
and to run your whole business for maybe 20, 30, 40 years. So with that, you better have a holistic perspective in terms of how to invest your money, how to screen people who are going to be your business partners. I mean, how to, deal with ladies who may have different agendas, how to deal with how to have refusal skills to say no to drugs. I mean, you have to have those tools. And so the NBA rookie transition program does that. The college level program is a little different because these guys are trying to get in the door. And sometimes their fantasies and their aspirational thoughts may exceed reality. What I mean by that is they think, okay, I'm going to come in, I'm going to tear this thing up for 1 year and I'm gone.
Right.
They just don't understand.
Yeah.
They may have the game, but they don't have the lifestyle skills to deal with these adults,
Mm-hmm.
So thank God for the G League, and thank God for the tools and life skill coaching that they get in the G League, so that some of these guys who are overly aspirational in their thinking, who
Mm-hmm.
want to just come in for 1 year and go, that at least they get a chance to test a little reality.
Mm-hmm.
And once they test a little reality at the G League and they say, this is much harder than what I thought, they
Yeah.
got an option. They can go back to school and get a degree and not play, or they can keep, chasing their dream and see where that leads them. But it's more reality based,
No
you know.
question. No
Now,
question.
so but the colleges that I deal with now, um, I try to get my coaches that I'm working with to think in terms of let's talk about what is this kid going to need to transition into this college? What is he going to need? You know, the biggest thing he's going to need is and sounds so basic. The biggest thing they're going to need is to have the coach to be the biggest voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that sounds so simple to the guys out there, but you can't serve two masters,
Mm-hmm.
And if you got your father and then you got your best friends telling you what to do and how to do it, it makes it really complicated to buy into the culture of that college team.
Mm-hmm.
And if those messages are blurred, more than likely you're not going to hear anything else that's going to be said to you for that whole year. And so that's
Absolutely.
going to be a piece established from the beginning that you have to be the voice. If you can do that, then I think you got 50% of your coaching, that player under your belt. But a lot of coaches don't deal with that. They just say, well, his uncle does this and uncle does that, and he'll be okay. No, 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 no.
Right.
There's a coaching and there's another coaching, and that coaching is superseding your coaching. So
Yeah.
that's a challenge.
Awesome. So we got to get ready to wrap this thing up. So I usually don't ask people for things here on my interview, but I got to ask you that one day that you'll come back and we can finish this this conversation, because I got so much more that I'd like to talk to you about, and you're dropping so many jewels and so many nuggets. I think anybody who we can apply this off the court and in real life as well. So, you know, if you'll come.
That's the call out. I accept the call out, brother. I accept it. I accept that challenge.
Absolutely. So hopefully we can get you back on here and we can talk some more. And thank you, Steve, and thank you, Claire, for getting us on here on this Instagram tonight. Dr. Joe, thank you so much, man. I told you this is
I
my
appreciate
25th.
You, man.
This is my 25th episode, so this is a milestone episode for me, man. And to have you on it, man, you made it absolutely special. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you, brother.
All right, take care.